Can you hear me now that we're live?
I can hear you.
Okay, well, that's great. Let's see. Bear with us, everyone. We are trying out a new platform for the first time in the age of wonderful technical advances. There's still fun technical difficulties. Okay, my page is loading. Would be great if things loaded quickly. Okay. Let's see if this is actually working. Okay. Is this actually working? I think it is. Okay. Well, we are going to try this out. Okay. We are live. Hooray. We'll see how this goes. Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Singh. I am the Development and Communications Manager with Neighbors Together. And this is another episode of This Week at Neighbors Together, a new series that we're putting together to highlight everything that's going on at Neighbors Together during the COVID-19 crisis. We thought it was really important for us to be super transparent with you all on the work that we're doing and all of our efforts during this time, because I know so much is changing and we just want to make sure you all know what's going on. Last week, we interviewed Natalie Smythe, who is our Director of Programs in HR. If you have not checked out that interview, you can go down this feed and check it out, or you can go to YouTube at our Neighbors Together YouTube page and check out that interview. It was wonderful. And thank you again, Natalie, for all of your support. So this week we have a jam-packed interview because we're going to be talking about our community action program. And I'm here with Amy Blumsack, who is our Director of Organizing and Policy at Neighbors Together, an overall wonderful human being. And I want to dive into our community action program. Thank you so much, Amy, for being here throughout all these technical issues. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And so I just want to dive in and talk about our community action program. What is our community action program for people who do not know? And what did our community action program look like before COVID?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Amy Blumsack. I am the Director of Organizing and Policy at Neighbors Together, and I work in the Community Action Program. The Community Action Program, or CAP as we call it for short, is where we engage members of Neighbors Together in grassroots organizing, policy advocacy, legislative advocacy, and leadership development work. So essentially, we are asking people who are low income and living in New York City and experiencing a wide variety of difficulty through various systems and structures that aren't set up well to serve low income people. We're asking them to bring their lived experience and their expertise and to sort of help us lead the charge in making changes to those policies and laws and fix them so that they really serve people who are struggling to make it in New York City and really make New York City and New York State a more just place. And so, we do that by doing grassroots organizing, by developing the skills of our members, honing the skills that they already have, and developing them as leaders so that they can lead the charge for a more just and equitable city and state.
Beautiful. Thank you, Amy. So before COVID-19, what were some campaigns that we were working on in the Community Action Program, and what did they look like?
Great. So before COVID-19, CAP was already really busy. We work primarily on issues related to homelessness and housing. So we ran a number of campaigns and were involved in a number of coalitions. We have two what I call in-house campaigns, so where we have developed the campaigns all on our own, completely out of our members' lived experience. One is the Value in Housing campaign, which stands for Voucher Advocates Lifting Up Equity in Housing. And it is a campaign that we created with people who have rental subsidy vouchers to fight to end both the discrimination against people who are paying their rent through these vouchers, and also to make the vouchers a better, more effective tool for getting people housed. Essentially, just quickly, like, lots of people are languishing in the city shelter system with rental vouchers in hand because they don't pay enough money to get people moved out. They're not competitive in the rental market. So we developed a whole amazing member-led campaign around vouchers in our Value in Housing campaign. And we developed a whole legislative platform around that. So that's one in-house campaign. Our other one is our longest running campaign, which is the 3/4 House Tenant Organizing Project, which organizes people who live in or used to live in 3/4 houses. And 3/4 houses are essentially underground housing market for very, very low income New Yorkers who don't want to live in the shelter and who can't afford market rate rent. So essentially, it's a private landlord who hangs out a little sign that sounds really great, like Amy's House of Hope. And they rent beds to single adults, often cramming 6 to 8 adults in one room, usually mandating that they have to attend a substance use treatment program as a condition of maintaining their bed. And then also just with really bad physical conditions like overcrowding, lack of heat and hot water, lots of vermin infestations, and also just generally really intense harassment. It's really like a money-making scheme that profits off the back of very vulnerable people. So TOP we've been organizing since 2010, and we have been doing some really exciting work in TOP. So that's our other in-house campaign. Then we were involved in a citywide coalition called House Our Future New York to fight for the city to set aside more of its affordable housing plan for homeless New Yorkers. We also are involved in a statewide campaign called Housing Justice for All, where we were fighting for a whole slew of bills to increase tenant protections, to give tenants more rights, to house the homeless, to increase funding to public housing, to make sure that there is what we call a New York Homes Guarantee to ensure that every person living in New York State has a safe, dignified place to live that they can afford. And then we also ran the New York City Homeless Union with some other organizations, and it's really a place to build the homelessness movement in New York City. And we were also doing work around the census. We were doing lots of get out the count work for 2020 census, which if you haven't filled out your census yet, please take time to do it online today.
Yes.
That's what we were doing before COVID.
No, just nothing. No, right. No busy work.
I forgot one thing. Plus we do a leadership development series. So we were doing, we do 3 rounds per year of leadership development, essentially a class for our most involved leaders. So we were in one of our leadership development series. That's what we were doing.
Yes. So as you can see, our CAP team was just not busy at all before COVID-19. I always say that when talking about CAP, I feel like when I'm giving an overview of Neighbors Together, I always say the whole meeting could just be about the work that we do in CAP, but for the sake of time, I can't. So I'm glad we have the time now to do that. So let's shift. Thank you so much for that beautiful outline of our work. And let's shift to what our community action program is looking like now. Post-COVID, there have been some major changes, just in the way that our team is operating daily, but also in the work that we're doing right now. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, so our focus has shifted to a relatively significant degree, as I think it has for basically everyone. I mean, most people's experience in COVID is significantly different than what it was before COVID. So a lot of CAP's work has been focused on a campaign that we're now calling Homeless Can't Stay Home. So, I feel like in most circles, in most places, no one is really thinking about homeless people or people who don't have housing. And we found that to be really true and extremely problematic as COVID was coming to light. And, as things were really getting underway in a more serious manner in New York State and especially New York City. So as our elected officials, the governor, the mayor, were continuing to say, everyone needs to safely socially distance and stay home. What they were failing to recognize is that for homeless people, you can't stay home. You have nowhere to go. You don't have a place to safely socially isolate. And so the Homeless Can't Stay Home campaign is fighting for a few different things. First and foremost, we're asking the mayor and the governor to open up 30,000 hotel rooms in New York City so that people in congregate shelters, which means like large dormitory style shelters where people don't have their own rooms, of which there are many, many, many in New York City. So we're asking for folks in congregate settings to be able to have individual hotel rooms with private bathrooms so they can safely socially distance, just like all the rest of us are being told to do. And that will help protect them, and it will also help protect everyone in New York City and also like our already overburdened hospital system. The second thing that we're asking in the Homeless Can't Stay Home campaign is that all criminalization and sweeps of homeless New Yorkers stop. So New York City has a practice of what they call sweeps, where they go to places that the hotels are also for street homeless New Yorkers. That's a really important piece to say. But also related to street homeless New Yorkers is that the police often come by for sweeps that are initiated by the Department of Homeless Services, where they ask people to clear where they are staying and essentially say, if you're not moved by XYZ time on this little poster that we've put up, then we're going to throw out all your stuff, which is actually incredibly upsetting and problematic to begin with, but also it goes directly against CDC guidance. So the CDC has said you should not be moving homeless encampments during the middle of COVID, that increases spread. And yet we've seen continued sweeps and maybe even an uptick in sweeps. And what we're hearing from people on the ground is that they're getting more and more aggressive. So that's our second demand, is to stop sweeps. And then our third demand is that we need to find a way to permanently house homeless New Yorkers who are put into hotel rooms, right? That bringing them out of congregate shelter systems and then planning to put them back in is not sufficient when we know that COVID-19 will continue to have these, peaks and valleys for an unknown amount of time. So that we really, really need to recognize the way that housing is healthcare and that homeless New Yorkers need a permanent, affordable place to live. And then we had some other demands that we won already, which were really exciting, like making sure that homeless New Yorkers had access to things like showers, to basic hygiene, also to food. So some of that has already been taken care of, and it's really exciting that the campaign has been able to make progress as quickly as we have on those issues.
Yeah, thank you so much for that beautiful overview. I want to just talk about the state of hotels right now and why we're focusing on that number, 30,000 hotel rooms, and how many hotel rooms are actually vacant in New York City right now. And also what's been the progress of these asks from Homeless Can't Stay Home?
Right, that's a really good question. So right now in New York City, there are over 100,000 empty hotel rooms. As you can imagine, no one really is traveling. Tourism has certainly plummeted. And so some accounts of the hotel industry, estimated that they've lost as much as like 80% of their business, probably more at this point. So we know that there are an immense number of empty hotel rooms just sitting, and that also means that there are people who worked in the hotels who are without work as well. So we're asking for 30,000 hotel rooms because 30,000 hotel rooms is our best estimate of the number of people who live in congregate settings who need to be given the ability to safely socially distance and self-isolate so that they can protect themselves from COVID-19 and, protect spread to others, especially as we've learned more about COVID and that sometimes people can be totally asymptomatic, but still like shedding the virus. It's more important than ever that people be able to safely socially distance in an isolated way. And, in most congregate shelters, they can't do that. They're sleeping less than 3 feet apart. They're sharing bathrooms. They're sharing spaces where they eat meals together. The hallways in the shelters are narrow. You literally can't be in a congregate shelter and safely abide by the recommended CDC guidelines. So it's really important that the city should leverage this resource to protect homeless New Yorkers. You know, they deserve the exact same protections that any of the rest of us do.
Yeah.
I know.
And then what have we seen so far in the progress of the campaign?
Right. So in terms of the hotel rooms, unfortunately, the mayor has been really extremely stubborn on this issue. He continues to say that he doesn't think hotels are the answer. I think there is a real unfounded fear that every single homeless New Yorker needs intense services, and that, you know, the sort of party line coming from the city or from the mayor is that they won't be able to provide those services, or that they're unwilling to pay for those services. But we know that that's not true. I mean, I think it is perpetuating a really, really old stigma about homeless people in general, that they are all extremely mentally ill, or that they all use substances, or, you know, that they're not independent enough to take care of themselves. When the truth is, like, there are many, many, many people living in the shelter system who are completely independent and literally just need a place to live. There are people who work for the city who live in the shelter system. There are many people working multiple jobs in the shelter system. And so it is a really unfair brush and an inaccurate brush that the mayor is painting people with. So that is one of the key things that he's been saying about why they can't move people in. And then also, I would say that he's been pushing a lot of inaccurate statistics, you know, lots of like purposeful misrepresenting of the numbers. So the city has committed to moving 1,000 people out per week, and they're saying they've housed 8,000 people thus far. But what they're not revealing about that number is that 3,500 of those people were already housed in hotels before the city even began to, you know, talk about moving people out. So I think, you know, 1,000 per week is definitely because of the work we're doing in Homeless Can't Stay Home, but it's also deeply insufficient. If we move 1,000 people out of the shelter system per week, we could be stretched as like all the way through the summer. And people we really don't have that long to wait. People's lives are at stake. You know, COVID has spread to over almost 120 shelters, I believe, at the last count, maybe even more, well over 100 shelters, we can certainly say. And over 70 homeless people have died. And they think, you know, this is really a matter of life and death. So it's a problem that the city isn't doing more. One other thing that has happened is that City Council introduced a bill. So we're working with some members of City Council to get a bill passed that would require the city to house homeless New Yorkers in hotel rooms. And that is in process. But it's unfortunate that you'd have to legislate the mayor to do the right thing. Legislation can sometimes be a slower process, and we know that the mayor has the power to make it happen yesterday. He is refusing.
Yeah. When did we make this original ask, the Homeless Can't Stay Home campaign?
The Homeless Can't Stay Home campaign launched our demands at the end of March. So I want to say around like March 23rd or thereabouts that we went live with our demands. And so it's been, if you go to our, we have a website, it's homelesscan'tstayhome.org. So
yeah, we'll put it in the comments for people so they can reference it.
Yeah, thank you. So it's been 47 days since we called for the hotel rooms. 47 days.
Yeah, and I know that there was some news about the health commissioner and FEMA that came out around a demand for an order for the mayor to get people out of congregate shelter, and then FEMA giving some aid to crisis relief in the city. Can you talk more about that, and then talk about the timing of these demands and this opportunity that has come from the city and how we found out about that?
Yeah. So, and Phil, chime in if I'm not getting quite there, but basically, one of the main pieces of pushback that we've been getting from the city, you know, and a lot of the pushback that was given at the city council hearing on this proposed piece of legislation is that the city can't afford it, or that it will cost too much money to rehouse all these homeless New Yorkers into hotel rooms. And what is really untrue about that, first of all, let's just acknowledge that we shouldn't be putting our price tag on people's lives, right? If it was your mom or your aunt or your brother or your son, you would not say, I'm sorry, or that's too expensive, we can't afford that for you. So it's a really sort of troubling argument to make in the first place, but it's also really disingenuous because there is FEMA money available to the city. It's, essentially like disaster response money that's available to the city that other localities have opted to use for this exact same purpose. So San Francisco has leveraged FEMA money to pay for people to be put at homeless people specifically to be put into hotel rooms during the COVID crisis. And what we eventually relatively recently learned is that the city had inquired about FEMA money, right? The health commissioner had written a letter to FEMA inquiring about like requesting the money and seeing if it was possible for the city to gain access to the money, in which the letter states that it is explicitly that it is unsafe for people in congregate settings to be living together and that they need to be in individual rooms, private bathrooms, so that they're not spreading COVID or vulnerable to COVID. And so what happened was there was a series of letters back and forth between the city and FEMA where they essentially did get approval for the money, and ultimately the city never acted on it. They never took the money that was explicitly and clearly available to them to pay for the hotel rooms. And that letter goes back as far back as early April.
So, I remember it came out, the mayor had the order from the health commissioner on March 25th, and then FEMA said that they would fund this work on March 30th, and then Homeless Can't Stay Home had their ask in early April. So the fact that this all went to a city council hearing with this knowledge is really disturbing, given the mayor's actions now. Speaking of the mayor's actions, can we talk about what's going on the subways now? Because I know that's become quite a big story throughout the state. And I know the governor has made comments on the subways that have been really not so great, in our opinion, when it comes to homeless New Yorkers. Can you talk about that a bit more?
Yeah. So people know, there are an estimated, I want to say like,
Oh, Amy, hold on one moment. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but it looks like our screens might be frozen on live. I'm just going to reload the page really quickly to see if we can update that. Okay. Huh. Sorry, folks. For some reason, this is not working for us in the way that it should be. Because I can hear us live. Amy, are you still on the phone? I can't even see your screen. Did you exit out of the platform? Yeah, that would be great. Sorry, guys, we're just going to see if Amy can join us. And if not, then we'll pick up our conversation another time to go through everything that we were hoping to talk about. But unfortunately, we're having some technical difficulties with live. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up this interview with me just saying thank you so much for listening. And I'm so sorry that, we're having some technical difficulties, but we're going to interview Amy at another time. And we're going to have more of a conversation about what's going on the subways and what people can do to help. I'm going to enter some links in the comment section that you can go to follow the Homeless Can't Stay Home campaign and sign the petition, and then head to the GoFundMe to help support people to move into these hotel rooms, because unfortunately we're having to crowdfund for them right now. But we'll be back another time with Amy to talk about subway sweeps, what we're seeing, and then the other programs that we're working on right now. And I think we won't be doing it live next time. We'll just post an interview. But thank you for joining us. We're really excited that we could have some time to talk to you guys about the work that we're doing. And I'm sorry for these technical difficulties, but we'll be back again. Don't worry.